Gettysburg's first and premier podcast about living in and visiting Gettysburg has returned from that long commercial break. Thanks for sticking around. Here's Matt.
I want to first say, ladies and gentlemen, that the book The Heavens Falling has been out now for a year. And it's a number one bestseller on the New York Times, right? Historical fiction list?
Not quite.
It is a bestseller on the Addressing Gettysburg historical fiction list.
True.
And it is written by Jonathan Lucci, and he is here right now. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you. It's great to be here again.
Do you mind if I just call you John?
Please.
Okay, because I bit my tongue, and the more syllables I have to say, it hurts. So.
Only my mother ever called me Jonathan.
Okay, good. I want to say, first of all, thank you, because I'll just read you a line here. Matthew found himself nodding along, thinking, first the carrot, now the stick. Thank you for naming a character after me.
You're very welcome.
I appreciate that. You are a true fan of Addressing Gettysburg. Okay.
So in the next book, there'll be a Bethany?
Actually, that
volume 3.
Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, now listen, let's go through this here. Mm-hmm. So you how'd you get the idea to, like, what made you say, oh, I'm going to write a trilogy of the Civil War? Because that's, not an easy task.
So I've always loved history. History was what I studied in college. So my undergraduate education's in history and philosophy.
Okay.
And, I work in the business world now, but I have always loved history, and particularly I've always loved the Civil War, and even particularly within that, I've always loved the Battle of Gettysburg. Coming here is like my favorite thing in the world. I've always wanted to be a battlefield guide, etc. So,
are you taking the exam?
I am. Yeah. There's a test for that.
Yes,
yeah.
I hear. Yeah, I see it as a, see how good I do this time. Maybe someday I can pass it.
I have a listener email for later, and she says the same thing. It's, I don't expect to pass, but, I want to see how I can do. So
yeah,
I think that's a great boon for the federal government, because the only way you can find out if you're good or not is to pay $250 to take the test.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by that, but I paid my $250. So.
It could have been higher. So
that's true.
They kept it at that, which is good. Yeah. All right, so you're into this stuff, and you decide, let's do a novel.
Yeah, so I've always been a bit of a writer, I guess. This was my first published book, but in college, I was a speechwriter for congressional campaigns and 2 national political lobbying organizations while I was in college.
My goodness.
Weren't you a speechwriter for Barack Obama?
While I was a county coordinator for Barack Obama. I wish I was a speechwriter. I was only 19, 20 years old, a little young to be that high up there. But no, I was a speechwriter for a couple congressmen on their campaigns to become congressmen, and then a speechwriter for a lobbying group in Washington, D.C. while I was in college. So I've always loved writing, and I always kind of did it for fun a little bit. When COVID first happened and, we all had to work from home, I decided, I've always had this general idea of wanting to write a Civil War epic, of as big a proportion as I could to try to show the scale and immensity of the war and not just have it be pigeonholed about one part of it.
Right.
And I thought, I can't remember exactly where I came up with the idea, but I thought it'd be great to tell the story through 5 brothers who go off to war. And so the premise I guess, for those of you who have bought The Heavens Falling and read it, thank you very much. I certainly hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, thank you for buying it anyway. But
my only criticism is there's no pictures.
There are no pictures now.
So I have to actually read it.
And I've been told, it's a little long. Well, volume 2 is longer, actually.
So, wow, look at you.
It's interesting. It's a little long. Just enjoy the work. Let the author take you on the journey. Just sit back. Everybody with the ADD, it's getting old. Go get some Ritalin or whatever you got to take for ADD, and stop telling people it's too long.
Right.
Go ahead.
So, for those of you who have not read The Heavens Falling, if you're excited about what you hear about Volume 2, please buy volume 1 because you really won't know what's going on. It is one of those trilogies that
because you have a lot of characters here.
Yeah,
Matthew.
So there's 5 brothers: Matthew, Luke, Peter, Charles, and Robert. And
they have some of them, all of them have love interests.
Yeah. So basically, the premise is in the very beginning of volume 1, the first scene actually takes place in the 1960s. A little girl and her mother are walking through a cemetery in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is where I was born and raised, and they see a family plot of gravestones, and they see that there are these 5 brothers who went off and fought in the Civil War, and you find out as the reader there in the very first pages that 4 of the 5 brothers do not make it through the war, that they die in the course of the war, and only one of them survives. But it is not made at all clear to the reader which one that is,
right?
Who's going to survive. And the entire trilogy is the story of those 5 brothers. And then my hope was to, very similar to, it sounds strange, but very similar to a Game of Thrones type world where you start focused on this family and then the story builds out from there. So by the time you get to volume 2, not only are the brothers the characters and their father and their love interest, but everyone that they've met, a lot of them become characters themselves.
That is pretty epic. That's
the idea. But
that's life.
Yeah. So the idea in my mind was to try to show as much of the war and the experience of living in the 1860s as possible. So, the brothers, all in their own way, take part in the Civil War. I place them in real units. The one who's in the Navy is on a real ship. And I really try to be as historically accurate as possible when it comes to those units fighting where they fought, the ship going where it went. But through their father, who is a congressman, through other people that they meet, I try to show the political dimensions of the war, the economic dimensions, foreign policy and diplomacy. But really, I hope coursing through the whole thing from the very beginning is the idea that the American Civil War has immense meaning to this little girl in the beginning who's African-American and is going to grow up in the course of this book as you kind of have snippets of her life intermixed with it, taking part in the civil rights movement. And my hope is to show that the American Civil War is this great struggle over what it means to be a free country, what it means to be America. And it's a battle that is still going on. And so there's this straight line that runs from the Civil War to the civil rights movement to today. And that's what I think gives the American Civil War such meaning.
Now, I can guarantee you that somebody just heard that and said, oh, God, another woke masterpiece that's going to browbeat me over the head with this nonsense. But I can tell you, as someone who can't stand that stuff, that's not in this.
No,
it's really not. No. Cindy, Cindy, move over to the mic there, because Cindy loves this book. Now she'll admit it's taken her a while to finish it because it's so long, and we don't always have the time to sit and read.
Right.
But she's gotten a lot further in this huge book than I've gotten in a 150-page book in years. So, but Cindy, you love it. What do you love about it so much?
It's the writing. Honestly.
Yeah, he really is a good writer.
Yeah, he's a great writer. He develops the characters so well. So when he says that you need to start with the first volume, you definitely do. I can't imagine understanding a thing starting at the second book because there's just so much detail into it. But I'm also learning a lot, I'll say. So, and I think I've mentioned this before on a show, if anybody out there is like me that doesn't necessarily know anything about the war or any specifics, this is a super great way to learn about it because he's extremely detailed. And from what, and I've like checked a couple of things with you. You've read some parts of it too, as far as the historical accuracy, and it's there. Like he really has done a great job with that research. So I do feel like I'm learning a lot by reading it as well. So.
Yeah, that is something that, thank you, Cindy. That is something that we talked about before was that because you're such a history nerd, you're aware of how people can be. And not that you can please everybody. None of us can do anything. Like there's, right, there's always somebody. But you do everything you possibly can without spending years studying one thing, one regiment, one battle, whatever, to make it believable. And it's basically like, it's fictionalized, obviously, but it's happening around real events with real people and everything like that. But how much time does that take you to do? Because that's a lot. Like if you were doing something about Gettysburg, that was fiction. Yeah. To me, that would be easier for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you're doing the war.
So the first volume took 2 years, but it was very, I would go months without writing because there was a little bit of like, is this really going to be good? Is anyone going to like it? Yeah. Volume 2, I wrote in about 6 months. So
really?
So it was quicker.
Yeah, he's been sending me screenshots of his like computer screen with pages and stuff.
Yeah, I always try to get Matt's opinion.
Yeah. And you know what? It's like, I feel bad because my opinion is like, this is so great. But I don't want to just say this is so great because then it sounds like I'm just being like, like I'm dismissing them.
I have a stressful job. I own multiple businesses in Virginia, Maryland, and Alabama, and it's a great job and I love it. And I get to develop business leaders and I use what I've learned in history a lot to do that, but it's nice to come home and just do this. This is my stress relief, this and reading.
What is your business? Give it a little plug so people can.
Yeah, so I co-own Weedman Lawn Care franchises in.
Don't get excited, folks, by the name.
Oh, we get that all the time, I assure you. Yeah,
we're like, hey man, I need to.
Do get excited by the name because we are the best lawn care company in the world. But if
it's not a marijuana,
I co-own locations in Winchester, Virginia, where I live, and the Maryland suburbs of Washington, D.C., Richmond, Virginia, and Birmingham, Alabama. And my job really, like I have a business partner who is much better at the financials and he has a business education. And much of what I do is leadership development and leading managers and things like that. And
so you're the people person. He's the numbers guy.
To a degree. He's good with people too. And I'm not completely numerically illiterate.
Right.
But I've actually taken my managers to Civil War battlefields frequently to do leadership trainings. At any rate, so I would go home from doing that and I would write every night. And it's, it's fun. I enjoy it. And one of the nice things about having a career aside from this is like, I'm not doing this for money, right? There's not a lot of money in it. I'm not doing it for money. So I hope everyone loves it. But if you don't, that's the way it goes. Yeah. Right. So like what I always say is I try to make it as historically accurate as I can about the stuff that I believe personally matters the most. So like I said, they're in real units. And so like the one character who in volume 2 is in the 2nd U.S. sharpshooters. Well, I'm very careful to make sure that he's where those guys were in front of the round tops, around the slider farm lane. Like I make sure to do that. But am I going to get something wrong about the buttons on his coat? Probably. Yeah. So like there's that, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to be precise about that, but that's not my area of specialty. So but there's probably things people could pick out.
But truthfully, by this point in the war, if they still have all of their buttons.
Well, yeah, that's a good, absolutely. Yeah.
Like that's what one of the things that drives me nuts is like people get insane about the little details. Yeah. And it's like, they've been fighting for a long time now. And like, if they still have their original jacket, I would be surprised.
I can be like that as well. I will say I can be just as bad as anybody else about that flank marker shouldn't be there. It should be 20 yards over there. Right. But at the end of the day, I like I said, it's got to have meaning that speaks to us today. And that's why I brought up the civil rights aspect at the very beginning of the book, because I just don't think the Civil War has, or it's sheared away from its meaning when we don't talk about that. And so while it's not, well, I certainly would not call it woke. If people read it and they say, oh, it's too much about slavery, it's too much about, liberty and equality for people of different colors, Well, I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is.
Did you?
But that's the way it was. I mean, that's what the whole thing was about.
Right.
And you're going, you're invading into a slave territory. Mm-hmm. You're going to encounter slaves.
I will say there is a Confederate character in this book because, again, the cast of characters grows, right?
Now, do any of the brothers go and defect to the Confederacy? And
no, they do not. So it's not a John Jakes full north
it's
and
not
south
north and
treatment.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Did you just break the binding on that book?
Oh, you have to.
Just happen?
You
have to.
You can have another one.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I think I already have two other copies.
Did you just purposely do it?
Well, I did because you don't break the binding on your book? How do you read the book without breaking the binding?
Carefully.
Very, very easily. But
it's a soft cover. I wouldn't do it on a hard cover.
People do when
What? Jeez. Oh, I'm sorry. It
literally hurts my soul.
Well, I'm sorry
to hear that noise. Like you did that, and my soul went.
And it's my book. Imagine how I feel.
I mean, right? So,
go ahead,
real quick about
What's
writing.
Your question?
So we had Jeff Shara on a while back,
mm-hmm.
and he talked about in his writing, he writes linearly from front to back, chapter
mm-hmm.
1 through chapter the end.
Yeah.
Is that how you write, or are you kind of like, here's an episode, now I need to connect them?
Mostly I write linearly, right?
Linearly.
So,
it's a hard word.
Yeah, mostly I write from beginning to end. The exception I would say is, and again, without, I don't think it gives too much away. There's a character in volume 2, who he's on the staff of Ulysses S. Grant, and he's on the staff of Ulysses S. Grant in volume 1 too. And so in terms of telling the Vicksburg campaign, it's a very complicated,
mm-hmm.
complex, logistical campaign without a lot of incredibly dramatic battles, but very dramatic maneuvers and moments. And I was, lucky enough to take a trip out there to take a tour of the battlefield and the campaign. With that, I wrote all those scenes. I just wrote all the Vicksburg scenes, even though as you read them through the book, they are interspersed throughout. Mm-hmm. I wrote those all at the same time because it is a very complicated campaign. I just thought that would be easier for me to write it correctly.
Can I try to do a reading of this? I just want people to hear what a good writer he is, if I may. I'm going to mess it up, I know, because I'm trying to get...
Are you going to do a sound effect?
No. Okay. Okay, here we go. Looking up from the embers, Peter saw Foote standing by the pilot house while the man inside that small structure struggled to follow Foote's insistent commands. The captain of the vessel stood nearby, clearly now only a spectator, like Peter himself. The final cannonball came in slowly and arced from the fort, and Peter caught sight of it and watched it in mute terror for several seconds as it hurtled towards them. Slamming into the pilot house, it burst the small structure to pieces. The man inside was splattered all over the deck, and a spray of blood and brain tissue hit Peter in the face.
Ooh.
Revolting and grabbing at his face to wipe away the horrid mess, Peter heard a shouted curse above the din of battle. Foote was lying on the deck, blood streaming from... Oh, it's the end of the page. You're just going to have to buy the book to find out what the blood was streaming from.
A Matt Calorie cliffhanger.
And
it was streaming from his foot.
Yes.
Okay.
But
there you go.
Was streaming
but really,
because he was injured in the foot. Yeah.
Listen, I have to say, I'm not a lot, not often, but once in a while, someone will send me something they wrote, whatever, and they're not bad. And I'm no judge, right? I'm not the best writer ever. I can maybe put a sentence together and then stare at it for months and go, actually, it should be this way, right? It takes me months, so I don't know. But this is something where I feel like it's humbling, believe it or not, when you are encountered by someone who is more talented than yourself, and you're like, wow, this is what real skill and talent does. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and you realize, man, I am so phoning it in, right? Like, it's not really there. This is so good. And when I read it, I picture it. I can see it playing out like a movie in my head, which is why I continue to play the lottery so that I can make it into a movie. I want to be the one to make it into a movie.
Well, so two things. One, and I mean this, all joking aside. I remember when I first messaged you, I said, when people write, I think it's Jen Murray wrote that great history of the Gettysburg National Military Park, and there's people who write histories about the battlefield and the memory, the historiography of the battle, and somebody who does that in 30 years will have a Matt Calorie chapter. So I think what you're doing on the show is fantastic.
The biggest disgrace in Gettysburg was addressing Gettysburg.
I do want to say for everyone, so I hope it doesn't scare you, I promise people are not getting sprayed with blood and brain tissue on every page.
But
just every other.
And I have, there's been people who said like, oh, it's too violent. I said, what I did was I just tried to be as realistic and accurate as I could. With all of it, again, there are some very violent battle scenes. There are some very tragic moments. I know when my wife, who is very, very helpful, and to say the least, in terms of editing for me, I'll hear her upstairs just bawling her eyes out, and I'll run upstairs and say, what's wrong? And she says, a word I can't say, how could you have done this to this character? And da-da-da-da. So there are some very tragic moments, and there are a lot of very, very human moments. There's a lot of, when I say romance, I mean actual, love.
Yeah.
And
not a sordid sex scene.
No, well, there's some of that too.
Yeah, but not sordid.
No, but I just tried to make it.
It's not 50 Shades of Grey.
It is not, no. But I just tried to write the best human novel that I could that happens to be about the Civil War. I didn't want to write just a Civil War novel. I wanted to write a human novel that would be good regardless of genre, that people even who don't like the Civil War perhaps might like the book and perhaps decide that maybe they do like history.
Yeah, and I think to Cindy's point, like that, like guys, if you're, well, guys, but I hear a lot from women and it's the opposite. So people, if your spouse is like, oh God, we got to go to Gettysburg again, I don't know why you're so into this stuff, get them to read this book. And I honestly believe that John's writing will jump off the page right away and they'll be like, hey, this is pretty good. Let me read it a little further. And they'll read it and they will get hooked and they'll fall in love with at least one of the characters in one way or another. And there's a little something in this book for everybody.
That's the idea. And I tried to make, all the characters, the brothers, they're not me. There's something, maybe a little bit of me in all the characters. 5
aspects of your personality.
Like they're not. And I had to, at least for me, when writing, it was hard. I had to remind myself, like, you're not the character, because if nothing else, you're just going to they're all going to seem the same.
Yeah.
So you have to really try to make sure that the character doesn't necessarily react to something the way I would react to it.
And that's very hard to do, to write as someone else and be believable, right? Like you really have to understand people.
Yeah, one of the things that I tried to approach with the requisite humility is writing about people who I really can't fully understand. So writing about women, writing about people of color and the challenges that they face and their particular aspects of their life and their experience. I feel like I have to write about them, and I want to write about them because for it to be a human novel, it has to have all of those things.
Sure.
But I can't pretend I'm like them.
But can't you imagine if you were in their shoes, what would I feel?
So that's what I try to do.
Yeah.
And I have tried my whole life to make sure that I'm surrounded by, a diverse group of people. And so hopefully that comes through.
But even, I would argue that like, you don't even need to do that. I mean, all you have to do is not everybody has this ability, but you need to be able to empathize. Like you need to say, well, how would I feel if I was in that situation?
Sure.
And build on that.
And you have to be able to do that as a writer because like I was not in the military.
Right.
I was not a combat veteran in any way, shape or form. And I can read every history book in the world. Like I can read The Face of Battle by John Keegan. It doesn't mean I know anything about what it's like to actually have a bullet fly.
Well, I like that detail about like wiping the blood and brains off his face. Cause wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Right. So Colby, you were in the Marines.
I was.
Did that ring true to anything from your experience where, you know, you get splattered by someone else and maybe you never were, but go.
I mean, yeah, I've had to burn camis and stuff because they're covered in other people's blood, you know.
And does it? Can you put yourself on the camera while you're talking, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at you.
Who wants to look at my bald? Okay. So go ahead. You've had to burn uniforms that.
Yeah, that's usually what happens. I mean, you know, if you're out, like sometimes we would be out for a month or so, and you'll have a change of clothes, but typically, when you get back to like your main base, if you've had something like that happen and your uniform is covered in blood, they'll burn those camis and then they'll just give you a sterile pair, which just means no name tapes. No, it won't say U.S. Marines. It won't have your name. It'll just be sterile, nothing on it. But you wear that instead, if that happens.
So, but the reaction to being splattered with somebody else's brains.
Brains I've never had on me. I'll put it to you this way. One of the craziest things I ever saw was on my first deployment. It was a dual IED attack. So there was a suicide vest and a suicide vehicle-borne IED had gone off, and we were maybe like a quarter of the mile down the road, and I was on QRF for our FOB. QRF is like a quick reaction force. So this, these two explosions go off, and I remember you could hear it very loud. We were very close. I looked over. There's this big smoke cloud, and I started running towards the trucks to get my gear on because I was a gunner. I was going to hop in the Humvee and the gun, and we're going to head down there and see, what they need help with. And as I'm getting into the truck, the second one goes off, and it's even bigger. And we get down there, and we pull up on this entry control point into the city of Ramadi. And you guys have seen the T-wall barriers they have, the big concrete T-wall barriers. Yeah. I mean, they're probably 2 feet thick, reinforced with rebar. And this suicide vehicle-borne IED, there were so many artillery shells in it. They were 155 artillery shells. I think they had like 3 or 4, but so much explosive in one little area that it had blown the car door, the driver's door, through the rebar in the T-wall barrier. Jeez. And it was laying on the other side of the wall. Smoke's rolling up. There's blood all on the inside of the door. Body part. I mean, dude, everything you read about, you're seeing it, and I'll be honest. The first time you see it, the biggest thing your mind is having to like wrap itself around. Right. Like, holy crap, dude, this is real. Like, right. It's no longer a movie. I'm watching a guy drive by. They got him in the back of a pickup truck. He's an Iraqi policeman, and he's missing his leg from just above the kneecap, and his muscles are like, like jiggling out the end. It's just crazy, crazy stuff to see. So there is a bit of that, but I'll also say, like, I guess the counterpoint to that is you see enough of it and you become real cold to it. You're like, this is just another day at the office. So yeah, initially it is very shocking, but then it just becomes normal.
Yeah. Good to keep that in mind. It just becomes normal, and
it is good to keep that in mind. I would say that's what I mean when I say a writer such as myself should try to approach things with humility, because I've read every book I can get my hands on about history, military history. No amount of reading will ever mean that I have even a fraction of the understanding of what Colby was just describing of his personal experience. And so at the same time, I want to tell the story as best I can, even though knowing I was not in that position. So as a writer, you try your best to be as true to the subject as possible. So one of the things that I hope makes this novel unique compared to other Civil War novels is that even though it is fiction and even though I tried to make the characters come alive, most of my research is the ORs and journals, things like that. So, for example, when I said this on the last show, but when I was writing the Gaines Mill scenes for the character who's in the 83rd Pennsylvania, I read the 83rd Pennsylvania's report in the ORs. I read that portion of Samuel Bates's History of Pennsylvania Volunteers. So I try to let the characters who are not real, but I try to have them resemble as much as possible the real people who did go through it. As much as I can.
All right. Volume 2.
Yes.
All right. Where does Volume 1 end?
Volume 1 ends in the last days of July, 1862. So as McClellan's army is sort of beginning to evacuate the peninsula, Volume 2 begins with Cedar Mountain and with the lead up essentially through Second Manassas to Antietam. And Volume 2 runs through July of 1863 when obviously some very important things happened.
I've never heard of any of this.
Yeah.
See, here's part of my problem. Mm-hmm. I swore to myself after reading Game of Thrones that I would never read another series until it was done.
Yep.
Because that was horrific.
Well, the same thing happened with the...
Oh, go ahead.
The same thing happened, speaking of Civil War historical fiction, the same thing happened with the frickin' Starbuck Chronicles. He gets 4 stories in, and then he says he's not going to finish the character. So, yeah, I get that. But I'm glad that you've already said that you're committed to doing 3.
Yes. Yeah.
It makes me feel good inside.
So don't think that I don't love you.
No, I understand.
But I'm not reading it until all 3 are done.
Well, I look forward to that.
And I'm sure a lot of people will take that approach because some people like to be able to go right to the next thing.
I can't do it.
And Sydney, what do you think about that? Do you kind of wish that you'd waited till all 3 were done because you love the first one so much?
I could see that point, but I'm a slow reader. I have to be in the mood to read, so
I often have to tell her to sound out the word.
War.
I've spent enough time with Sydney to know that's not true.
That's not true at all. She tells me to sound out the word. But that's okay though, because if Cindy did want to jump right into the second one,
it's coming out
on November 1st.
Yep.
Will there be an audiobook version ever?
I would like there to be. I think you have to have a certain... I've not looked into what the Audible requirements are. But I was actually going to say I know who I might want to, consider having do the audio version.
Yeah, Kevin Bryant, licensed Battlefield guide. Kevin Bryant, great voice.
Last time that I was here, I believe you did. You read a portion as if you were Morgan Freeman. And
did I?
Yes. And that
of course he did.
That would be fantastic.
Do I do Morgan Freeman? I thought
you did, yes.
Let me see if I could do it. Ordering one of... Wait.
Oh,
sorry.
wow.
That was pretty good, dude.
Now I'm self-conscious. Ordering one more salvo of fire into their triumphant and unscathed enemy. Robert then shouted for the men around him to abandon ship.
That's pretty good, dude.
As the crews of the other guns did the same. Robert helped lower several lifeboats into the water below, and only when the ship was pointing almost directly upward towards the sky did he decide his turn had come.
Someone's watched some Ken Burns.
I'm telling you.
You could get Gettysburg Gump to do it, too. Yeah.
You Gettysburg. Have an amazing ability to pick up people's cadence of speaking. And that you do that with Matt Atkinson, too. It's very creepy.
Yeah, I just got to work on getting the actual tone of their voice right.
But Matt's is a little higher pitched.
Yeah, he's more up in the nasally area there.
Yep.
Yeah.
But he could also go down low too, ladies and gentlemen.
I think to get Matt Atkinson really good, you got to raise your shoulders up to your ears, you know? Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
But he doesn't do that.
Just one.
Oh, just to get the voice.
Yeah. You know, just to get it up there.
No, Matt's got a good voice, and I do listen closely when he speaks because I want to try to really get a good Matt Atkinson impression.
He's good at leaving space.
See, the cool thing about your job is you meet all these people who I would be like starstruck.
Right?
Yeah, I'm so unimpressed by everybody.
Matt Atkinson, Scott Hartwig, Jim Hessler.
Scott Hartwig I'm impressed by. No, I like meeting everybody. Scott Hartwig to me is like meeting...
He's like the SEAL Team 6 of novelists, like that's the vibe you get. Like he's super professional is what I get.
He's not at all.
But that's the vibe.
He's not. What do you mean he's not?
If you see him give a speech,
work with him, he's not.
If you see him give a talk, though, he seems like dude, the guy is so well spoken. So
he's very good at what he does.
Smart,
no, he's great.
Super dialed in.
To me, Scott Hartwig is the. I guess, a lot of people look at Ed Bars as like the William Frasanitos. To me, it's Scott Hartwig because he was on all the History Channel shows I watched in high school.
PCN is basically Scott Hartwig.
Yeah, and then I moved here, and I've told this story before, and I've busted his chops about it, and he doesn't care. But the Park Service had put out an audition call for some video they were doing. And I was like 2 lines for this one part, and I practiced them, and I really was like, all right, I'm prepared for this. And I went to the audition, and it was Scott and whoever the director was. And I went in there, I did my audition, and I didn't get the part.
Rude.
Ouch.
I didn't really do a good job.
Did Scott do it himself?
I don't know who did it. I refused to watch it. I said, well, fine. But, but Scott was, and I didn't know that. So I walk in there, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's Scott Hartwig. But then when I moved back here, that was the first time I lived here. When I moved back here, he was one of the first people I interviewed when I started building up my recordings. And we were having wings down at the Gettysburg shed talking and before the recording. And I said, I auditioned for a video for you, and you didn't give me the part. And he's like, oh, yeah? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, meh. Went back to eating the wings.
Didn't care at all.
Couldn't care less.
I've met his mom and his brother.
Yeah, I met his mom at his book release party.
Oh, his brother's pretty
oh yeah,
New
you
York.
did too.
And then of course I work with his wife, so
he seemed like a very nice guy, dude. He seems like a very nice dude.
He is a very nice guy. Yeah. All right, but back to this nice guy sitting in front of us here.
Well, hey, I was
singing the praises of everybody else.
All these people. If I had met Harry Fonz while he was still alive, I probably would have genuflected. So.
No, it is.
Ed Barr.
Speaking as a Catholic,
as a true Catholic,
like a true thing.
Yeah.
When speaking as somebody who works here, you hear these people. And is it scary to you to think that you're now one of those people?
Oh, I'm not one of those people.
No. Yeah. But think about it. You now have written something. It is out there in the ether. People like it. People enjoy it. You are now within the Civil War canon, so to speak. Get it? Canon. And then
smoothbore.
I know, right? But now
very smooth. Very smooth.
Like you're one of those people that like people are going to be like, I just met Jonathan Lucci.
I will say, the first book. Obviously, the whole thing has been fun, but there was something about writing volume 2 when I got to Gettysburg, and I will say for the listeners of addressing Gettysburg that Gettysburg is a massive part of volume 2. Not only the battle itself, but there is a character who essentially lives in the town of Gettysburg from November of 1862 until the battle. So I try to show the town before it became. Yeah,
I like that. So like she moves to the town.
She does. And so,
to start a podcast.
See Little Round Top before it's Little Round Top, right?
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So
now do you have her go to these different locations before?
Yeah. So I think people who are very familiar with Gettysburg will know exactly what I'm talking about when I try to point out certain things that later become famous, right? But then
Rupp House. Huh? Rupp House.
Not quite that specific.
The Gettysburg Museum of History.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Gettysburg is a huge part of Volume 2. And because Gettysburg has always been my favorite, I know it's a strange thing to say about an event that was so terrible, but it's always been my favorite thing in the world. And I always wanted to go to Gettysburg.
Yeah, I know. Talking to.
Like, I always wanted to go to Gettysburg when my mom would say, like, where do you want to go? And, you know, it was always Gettysburg. So to write about the events that I've read my whole life about was really cool. It was. Like, to write about fighting on not just the famous things. There's a lot of Little Round Top, but again, there's the 2nd U.S. sharpshooters in front of Little Round Top. There's the artillery on Lower Seminary Ridge firing at the peach orchard. There's Sickles. I don't think I pronounced his name the way I'm supposed to with all the requisite hatred and all that stuff.
Sickles. Yeah.
But like all of that, Cemetery Hill, Culp's Hill, I wanted to write, and I mean no offense to, like, The Killer Angels is one of my favorite novels that I've ever read. But it is, by its nature, very focused on just a couple things in the battle.
Yeah, sure. That's true.
I try to show as much as I can. You know, one of the brothers is a member of the BMI, the Bureau of Military Information, on Meade's staff. So, you know, it was really a lot of fun to write the scenes of Gettysburg, which by themselves are about 40,000 of the 180,000 words in the novel. So it's a lot of Gettysburg. I'll say that.
And where does that end? Or I mean, you do know where it ends because it comes out on the 1st. So where does the Volume 2 end?
Volume 2 ends, Volume
3?
2 ends right in the aftermath of Gettysburg and Vicksburg.
Okay.
So, you know, it was very, very cool to have the interspersed scenes of the simultaneous events of Gettysburg and Vicksburg happening at the same time. And I do just want to say, you know, you said, how does it feel to have written a book about Gettysburg? Again, nothing like what people like Harry Fawns and Edwin Coddington and all those people did. But it was really cool to go to a store, to the Gettysburg Heritage Center, and see
your book.
Just walk in and see my book on the shelf.
Yeah.
And the reason why that was cool was my mom took me there when I was a little kid. Yeah. And I don't know if it was called the Heritage Center.
It was the Wax Museum.
Yeah.
The Wax Museum, yeah.
So she took me there when I was like 5. And she passed away a few years ago, and I miss her very, very much. And so it was very, very cool to go in there and see my book on the shelf and be like, well, Mom, look what I did.
Yeah.
So,
oh, that's nice.
That was cool. Yeah.
Here's another excerpt.
Oh, geez.
Battle scene, I guess.
The crashing of hundreds of rifles and cannon grew louder toward the rightmost regiments, still fighting on their hill and behind their stone wall. Abruptly, a noise shook Charles from his spell of battle-induced delight. It was an eerie wave of sound emanated. It was an eerie wave of sounds emanated from many throats, like scores of fox-hunt yips, and shouts mixed together with an inexorable wave of audible horror. The rebel yell. Wendell Clarkson.
From the Gospel of Jonathan Lucci.
Okay, go ahead. One last question.
I don't even know what to ask you because I really am like impressed by the length of the book, because that's not.
Thank God you said that. Here, hold it.
How many words?
Because
how many words is it? Colby asked.
The Heavens Falling is 160,000 words, and
that's too long.
Yeah, The Beauty of the Lilies, for those of you who were hoping it would be shorter, is 185,000 words.
Do you have a title already for Volume 3?
Yes, and I've started writing Volume 3.
What is the title?
The Judgments of the Lord, which is
good.
So they're all The Heavens Falling. Just real quick, The Heavens Falling is taken from a quote by John Quincy Adams, and it's in the beginning of the book, where he quoted what is actually an ancient Roman aphorism of "Let justice be done, though the heavens fall."
May fall, yeah.
Because he was speaking to a crowd of freed slaves in Pittsburgh, actually. Before the war, long before the war, and he was saying, you know, the day of your liberation is going to come someday, and in Congress he said, you know, that he would want that to come, even if it meant the blood of thousands of white men. And a Southerner who was horrified said, you know, what if it was a million white men? And he said, well, you know, if it was, you know, 10 million white men or something of that nature. I'm paraphrasing. Let justice be done, though the heavens fall. And The Beauty of the Lilies is, of course, taken from the Battle Hymn of the Republic.
Right.
And The Judgments of the Lord is taken from Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address.
Beautiful. The amount of thought that goes into this is really impressive. And that's where I find the beauty in things like this is like, there's thought, and maybe people don't even get it, right? It might not be so obvious to many people, but if they ask and you answer, they find that there's really thought and heart that goes into this thing. And that's why it's so good. And it really just does come off the page there. So,
and it's set in Western Pennsylvania, as all things should be.
Absolutely. So I was born and raised in Beaver, Pennsylvania, just north of Pittsburgh.
Enough beaver.
Yes.
Enough beaver.
Yes, I am forever. I always tell people I could live and I love Winchester, Virginia, where I live. I do. It's beautiful, but I will always be from Pittsburgh. When you're from Pittsburgh, you are always from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. You guys are a different breed out there. It's almost like you're on an island.
An island with 6 Super Bowls.
It's called Pennsyltucky Island.
Yeah. It is. I mean, it's its own thing.
Yeah.
And the rest of the country just does not get it.
But isn't it funny? Like, somebody said to me the other day about how, like, I have a girlfriend that I work with who's from Wisconsin, and she always talks about that. And she says, I'm from Wisconsin, but I never say I'm from I'm always like, I'm from Clarion.
Right.
Like
you're
the
from Clarion.
Yeah, you're from Clarion.
Okay, my brother graduated from Clarion.
See, all roads lead to Clarion.
Really?
Yes.
Do they? Mm-hmm. Why? I've never heard of it until I met you.
I almost went to Clarion, and being at the time I was thinking about being a priest.
Yeah.
And I went to visit Clarion, and the very reasons my brother loved it, which was that it was they were professionals at partying.
Okay.
My mother picked me up the next day, and I said, "Mom, can we go to church?" Really? I said, "I think I should go to a Catholic university."
Really?
Yeah. So,
wow.
And that's how I met my wife.
Scared by the partying.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Oh,
I was when you guys were talking in your first segment about all this stuff. All the shows. Music and TV shows. I was like, man, I really wasn't very cool.
Really?
As a kid, because I don't know half of what you're talking about.
You were a good Catholic boy. Were you an altar boy?
I was not, but I went to Catholic school. And then I always, my brother was an altar boy, and he always teases me that, oh, you weren't an altar boy. I said, I went to Franciscan University, which is a very conservative Catholic school. So I think that gets me extra credit.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I went to Catholic school. Mm-hmm. I'm from Clarion. I am.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, we all went to Catholic school. We all suffered in Catholic school.
I went to Pentecostal school.
Oh, Colby went to Pentecostal school, which is probably worse, actually, right?
I can tell you this: they had a baby bear, mama bear, and papa bear paddle. And if you got that was the degree of trouble you got, the size of the paddle.
Yeah. Oh, gotcha.
Paddle, the papa bear paddle was like yay long.
Yeah, the people can't see you, Colby.
Here. It was like yay long,
right?
Yay thick, and had holes in it, so it was more aerodynamic.
Yeah,
or you could hear that thing sing when they.
Oh, that does not sound fun at all.
Yeah, with Catholics, we just use guilt.
Yeah, right.
That's
we're really good at it.
We weren't allowed to. They weren't allowed to hit us by the time we were in school. Yeah. That stopped in the '60s, I think. I think my dad used to tell me stories of when they were learning penmanship, they would put like a quarter on their hand, and the nun would walk around with a ruler. And if she heard the quarter fall off your hand, she'd whack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got whacked by a ruler. I have a scar from it, but it was accidental. My first grade teacher was trying to tell us about how the nuns would do stuff like that. Uh-huh. And she was like, just like this. And she pretended to whack me, but it was one of those wooden rulers with the metal strip in it.
Oh, yeah, like a sword.
And she actually got me.
She got you?
My mom told me a lot of stories about nuns in Catholic school, but when I went to college, I wanted to be a priest, and my soon-to-be wife wanted to be a nun, and then we met and changed our plans.
And said, enough of
this. That does happen.
And I told her, I was like, you're way too nice to be a nun.
Yeah.
Which now, of course, I'm going straight to hell.
She is. She's too sweet to be a nun. You're right.
I don't think I've met her.
No, you haven't.
I need to.
Did you? Yeah, she didn't come up, huh?
I think you met her briefly at the cookout.
At the party, yeah,
at Matt's house.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
That's when I knew I had finally turned cool, by the way.
What?
It was when I got invited to Matt Calories.
We got to redefine your...
Said nobody ever.
I almost spit my drink across the room. Matt Calories' house is the cool place where all the cool kids hang.
You really were. You really were a sheltered child.
I was. Yeah. Get out of here. I was in my backyard playing Civil War with a stick by myself after watching Ken Burns' The Civil War.
Well, I was.
Yeah, we were doing that.
I was doing it too, but I had a cat, like a fake musket, like you can still get here. Except in those days, there was no stupid orange cap.
I remember. Yeah,
because people were smart enough to know the difference between a fake gun and a real gun.
Yeah, but see, I thought a stick was more versatile. It could be a sword. It could be a rifle.
Oh, it could be a club.
It could be almost anything. Yeah.
I did want to say, so I do think people who buy the book will probably notice that, so I would say my education in philosophy and theology probably comes through a lot of it as well. So again,
you're not hitting them over the head with God or anything.
No, actually not at all, in the sense of the characters all have very different views on God and religion and everything like that. What I mean, again, is I hope that the book really speaks to why this all means something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think if all it is, this unit moved here and that unit moved here, as cool as that is, it's divorced and shorn away from the things that give it meaning.
Yeah. So, why are those units even out in the field to move? What is behind all that? So yeah, of course you got to get to that. All right, November 1st, it comes out. I put a link, ladies and gentlemen, in the description of this episode to get Volume 1. Volume 2 comes out on November 1st, and that will be available on Amazon.
Yep.
And you will go and you will get it, and you will love it, and you will like it, and you will support our friend who is also a fellow patron, if you're patrons, and a listener of Addressing Gettysburg. And would you like him to sign that for you? I know I broke the spine. Oh, wait, but how do you read a book without breaking the spine? What is wrong with you?
Forever open to this page.
No.
Like you literally
to lay flat if you don't break the spine.
He broke.
I see. Yeah.
Bethany, I mean, that just sounds like someone that doesn't use their book.
Yeah, you just have books for decoration. I have books to use.
All you have to do is do this. And look.
No, it's a pain in
the spine.
First of all, that book is 25 pounds. Okay? And if I have the time to read, I have the time to read, and I'll sit there and read.
Who don't want to read a 25-pound book, it is available on Kindle.
It's available on Kindle, and someday Morgan Freeman and Wendell Clarkson will do. They'll alternate chapters and read the book for Audible.
Yes,
I think that would be great.
With a special appearance by Gettysburg Gump.
The Heavens Falling, a novel of the Civil War by Jonathan Lucci. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
Now you're going to get me sued.
That's a different book. That's a different one. All right, listen, where are you going to join us for dinner?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely,
great.
Yeah.
Do you have a place you'd rather go?
No, I'll let you guys who are lucky enough to live here decide.
All righty then. We will be back after these words. Thanks, Jonathan Lucci. We'll be back after these words, ladies and gentlemen, with some exciting news. No, that's not it. It is.
Been craving a Hot Pocket or a bag of popcorn? Now's the time to go and get it. We'll be right back.
Catch full episodes of AG Today live every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern to keep up with everything that's going on in Gettysburg and with the Addressing Gettysburg community. If you think history should be shared and not shied away from, and you want to help combat YouTube's shadow banning of history channels, then please like and share this video and subscribe to this channel. And don't forget, click that notification bell when you do.